We all know Tears of the Kingdom is going to be good, but will it be better than Breath of the Wild? And more broadly, just how good will it be? The answer to these questions is a bit less obvious than you might think, so let's not waste any time. Let's start by quickly going over what made Breath of the Wild such a special game. I could bore you to death by talking about the hundreds of reasons that this game is great, from the physics system to the creative combat, but I think we all know that there's one thing that stands out: the exploration. And I'm not really talking about the places you can go and the things you can find. I'm more talking about the freedom that you're granted and how you can get where you want to go. In case you forgot, since it has been 6 years, Breath of the Wild's traversal was unique due to the ability to climb large structures and glide off of them. It was an extremely simple loop that was immensely satisfying because what was once a senseless act of self-destruction in other games becomes a tool for exploration in Breath of the Wild. But it's actually when you don't play Breath of the Wild that you really start to feel this difference. I remember when I played Skyrim for the first time in a few years after having played Breath of the Wild, and that feeling of being stuck on top of a mountain was just kinda weird. The glider in Breath of the Wild is an addition that I didn't realize I needed until it was gone. And this sense of freedom can be seen in basically every facet of this game, from enemies to puzzles. It's thanks to all of this freedom that the game stood out as much as it did. So the natural question is, what comes next? Well, the most straightforward answer is, solve the problems with Breath of the Wild, drop the Nintendo seal of approval, and move on, right? Well, it's not quite that simple. Before anything else, let's address the elephant in the room. The first question in this video was, will Tears of the Kingdom be better than Breath of the Wild? And I think you'd be crazy to say no. But just how much better it will be is where things start to get interesting. First, let's look at what we know it improves, starting with enemy variety. From the most recent trailer alone, we know we'll have more than twice as many enemy types in the sequel as we had in the original. From Redeads to three-headed dogs to unnamed flying creatures, it's clear that the developers were listening when people asked for more enemies. And while we still don't know for sure whether or not we're getting traditional dungeons, we do know that there will be new areas to explore, like the underground caves and of course the sky islands that seem to play a central role in the game. Hopefully we see other smaller problems addressed, like weapon durability and just a general increase in quality of life. But even with a few changes like new enemies to fight and more locations to discover, this game will be better than Breath of the Wild. As for how good it could be, and admittedly this is probably a hot take, but Tears of the Kingdom could be the best open world game of all time. I'm just not totally convinced it will be yet. Considering I don't work at Nintendo, most of this is going to be speculation, but hear me out because I wouldn't be saying best of all time without a solid reason. So just for a bit of elaboration on that, here's a scale. I think the ceiling for Tears of the Kingdom is here, and the floor is probably here. Now, the reason I think the ceiling is so high is because of that element of freedom that I talked about earlier. I'm still not totally sure if there's a game that captures that sense of freedom like Breath of the Wild did. However, the biggest flaw with Breath of the Wild was the lack of more monumental discoveries. There's never a moment where you stand on top of a mountain, spot something poking out of a hillside in the distance, glide over, and find that it's actually the entrance to some massive underground dungeon. This could actually be addressed in the sequel. We've already seen what look like underground sections, and the Sky Islands have tremendous potential. However, it is still totally possible that Nintendo takes the lazy route and effectively just makes Breath of the Wild but with a few caves and sky islands. Granted, I don't think that'll happen, but it's certainly not impossible. This scenario becomes even more likely when you consider the overwhelmingly positive critical reviews that Breath of the Wild received. That said, more likely than not we'll get something in the middle, somewhere around here, but I'm optimistic, so let's move it up to here. So there you go. How good will Tears of the Kingdom be? Exceptional, significantly better than Breath of the Wild, and maybe, if we're lucky, the best open world game of all time. Maybe. But it'll still be a pretty popular game, unlike this game, which despite its quality will likely be the best game this year that not too many people play.